Role Mate to Soulmate is his new book that just came out at the end of July, right?
Yes, in
Yeah.
fact, the Audible just came out a few days ago.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, let's see, my background was being very involved with the feminist movement, and I was on their board of directors and spoke all around the world on women's issues. And then I began to hear, I remember in Japan the first
Oh,
time
sorry, sorry, sorry. Go
a
ahead.
teacher coming up to me afterwards and saying, in my class, boys have more problems than girls, and that started putting boys on in my consciousness. And my sister told me that, when parents divorced and there was a boy in the classroom in particular, and he didn't have his father involved, that was really, he tended to have his, be depressed and his grades went down. And so I started realizing that there were not just women's issues, but also issues boys and men were facing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started doing couples communication workshops, and that led to my teaching both men and women to listen to each other, and did experiences where they walked a mile in each other's shoes. And that led to my developing a couples communication workshop. And I was thinking about putting it into book form, and somebody writes me and says, this part of your workshop, which at that point in time was only a part of my workshop, was really so helpful. I'm using it now for my family business. And this was signed by the president of Walmart. So I thought,
Yeah.
and then I also was hearing that that the most advanced form of couples work and communication was active listening, but that active listening wasn't being done without the help of a therapist anywhere. And so I started asking myself, was there a way to have people be able to hear personal criticism without becoming defensive? And when I looked into that, I saw that biologically speaking, when you heard criticism, it was a potential enemy. So the fear was that somebody was going to attack you. Therefore, it made sense to become defensive, even to kill the enemy before the enemy killed you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that what was biologically natural was becoming defensive, and that was functional for survival. It was just terrible for love. And so I started working on whether I could get a couple, a person who is about to hear criticism, to feel safe and to feel that criticism, if listened to well, could actually increase love. And if he could be able to hear, or she could be able to hear that criticism from their partner, and as they're hearing it, they actually feel that the more their partner exaggerates, the angrier they are, and they provide a safe environment for that. That will make their partner feel secure, feel more loved by their partner, and therefore feel more love for them, and not have to have them walking around all the time with a concern that they have, and walking on eggshells, figuring out when should I say it, how should I say it, and ultimately keeping it to themselves, and then someday a big explosion happens.
Right, and active listening. Okay, that's something I'm familiar with. I have a therapist that does that, recommends that, and it's something maybe everybody else isn't. Do you want to explain what active listening is to?
Yeah. Yes, active listening is something where, let's say, you're upset about something, so that rather than your partner becoming defensive immediately, they say what they heard you say, and then they ask if it's distorted or if they've missed anything or anything that you'd like to add, and with the guidance of a therapist, and the therapist being in the room, it tends to create enough security for that to be a very effective method. The problem is when it happens independent of a therapist, the natural defenses that we have when we hear criticism come up immediately and naturally, and so you're hearing criticism without having those natural defenses, and then you're being expected to repeat the criticism without those defenses,
Mm-hmm.
and so it feels to the person without the guidance of a therapist like double jeopardy.
Right.
The problem is that not many people in the world cannot afford a therapist, and even if they can afford a therapist, I wanted them to be able in their everyday life not to have to run to a therapist when they heard something that was oftentimes, from the partner's perspective, they weren't expressing a criticism; they were just making a suggestion. I love it when you
Mm-hmm.
put the dishes in the dishwasher rather than in the sink. From the person saying that perspective, they just feel like they're helping to make the house more efficient and and more effective. And from the person hearing that quote concern, it doesn't feel like a concern; it feels like a criticism. And so, and they tend to respond defensively, like I did the other day. You didn't even notice it, or you left some dishes in the sink also. So what are you talking about? And that
Right.
type of thing.
Right, because that's what happens, right? If someone points out something of yours and then you're like, well, I put away 96 things that you left out, didn't say a word about it, and then you're going to criticize the one thing, right? Then we ask, like, you do this all the time because it's just human nature, right? That we're so defensive. It's that you can say 99 positive things to somebody, but they're going to ruminate on the one negative thing you said, not
Yes,
not the
absolutely.
99, So it's just, yeah, it's just something that is very important if we can find a way to better communicate to our spouse, to anyone, to our friends, any of our critical any critical thing. And active listening, yeah, like you said, so it's like if your partner is leaving the toilet seat up, then they're supposed to repeat that back to you, like, okay, I understood that you said I leave the toilet seat up all the time and it really gets on your nerves.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're saying it twice, and then, but it's kind of getting them to like calm down a little bit, think about what the other person is saying, right? Because a lot of times we have miscommunication. We don't even know what each other really like, what's behind certain things, right? Because they're the communication problem between men and women.
Oh, yes, and
Yeah,
it's between, in my workshops, I have many gay couples, and I can, and sometimes a parent and a child.
yeah.
I consider a couple, any two people that are in love with each other, that have had problems in their communication,
Mm-hmm.
that would like to remain in love with each other, but have a deeper love and have fewer problems in their communication. And so, in the what we were talking about a moment ago, the first thing I do for every couple is to set aside a caring and sharing time once a week. And that's always to be on their calendar so that anytime they come into sort of like a conflict with each other, they know they have the safety of sometimes knowing that their partner will be 100% able to hear them fully without being defensive. And so, because it's so biologically unnatural to not be defensive, I have the couple set aside time to have the person about to hear the criticism to first alter their natural biological state and do 6 mindsets. The one mindset that I was mentioning to you a minute ago was like what I call the love guarantee. And that's where the person says, before they hear a criticism from their partner, I know that if I provide a safe environment for you to express whatever you wish to say in whatever way you wish to say it, that you'll feel more secure with me, more loved by me, and therefore more love for me. The other thing I have the couples do, which is kind of fun, is sit back to back and write down on a piece of paper the answer to this question. If your partner is about to die, to be killed, like in a car accident or drowning, and you knew with 100% certainty that you could save her or his life, but in the process you'd have a 50% chance of losing your own life, would you do it? Yes, no, uncertain. They have to choose. And they're sitting back to back, and they're guaranteed that their partner will never see the answer to their question. And the only caveat is that you don't include consideration for children. You make believe you didn't have children.
Mm-hmm.
So if your partner was about to be killed, would you risk your life at a 50% level if you knew with 100% certainty you could save your partner's life? So they all write down their answers. Then most people are surprised to hear that more than 90% of the men say that they would be willing to do that. About 82-3% of the women say they would be willing to do that. And so the first meditation that I have people do before they listen to their partner's criticism is to say, well, if I would be willing to die for you, the least
Mm-hmm.
I can do is listen to you.
Right. Yeah.
And that sort of helps put that into perspective.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So you said 99% of the people, the men, would die for their wife, and
No, no, a little bit more
no,
than 90% usually. I mean,
oh, a little
sometimes,
more than 90%. I'm sorry, and then about 82% of the women.
It's the average, yes.
Average. Okay. Interesting. That's an interesting question. So I wrote down some things while I was going through your book, and I wanted you talk about a 4-part apology.
Mhm.
Can you tell
Yes.
us what the 4 parts of the apology are?
Let's say somebody says to you, gee, you left Krista's coat. You didn't give Krista a coat to wear to school, and she told me she was freezing and it was really cold. And so normally speaking, the response would be something like, "Well, I didn't think it was going to be cold," or "You told me it wasn't going to be cold," or "Nobody told me it was going to be cold." Krista could have picked up a coat. She could have gotten something else, that type of thing. So a 4-part apology would be first the important thing is the tone of voice. So the person responds with, "Wow, that's I'm concerned about that." So they share with you in a tone of voice that is sincere, um, a a the acknowledgement of the concern. Say that they don't want to have that happen again, and say that they will change their behavior the next time. The next time I'll make sure that I check with the temperature, or that I ask her if she wants a coat or she has something. So as opposed to an apology where you're saying, "Oh God, let me know if you ever find anything that I do that's right. I'm always wrong. You're always
Right.
right."
Yeah.
As if, let me know as if you'd even notice,
Right.
that type of thing. And one of the most important parts of I have in the Role Mate to Soulmate book 23 love enhancements. One of those is the caring and sharing time. Another one is the 4-part apology. But I'd say that the second most important one after the caring and sharing time is what I call creating a conflict-free zone. So they set up each couple sets up a caring and sharing time for 2 hours, and that caring and sharing time involves appreciating each other at 5 levels of specificity twice before you hear the concern, and then ending it with doing 5 levels of specificity afterwards. And I'll get to that 5 levels of specificity in a moment. But once that happens, so everybody has these 2 hours a week where they're really heard by their partner and their partner hears them. But then the question becomes, that leaves another 166 hours of the week. And so I teach couples how to create a caring and sharing, a conflict-free zone during that 166 hours, and then how to maintain it when a criticism occurs. So it's not a criticism-free zone. You will experience what you consider a criticism multiple times during the week, most likely. So how do you take that criticism? And so the first step, for example, in creating and sustaining a conflict-free zone is visualizing. And when you visualize, I can do 2 things here. I can respond to my partner's concern or criticism by giving a defensive response. And that will almost invariably lead to her or him becoming defensive in return, and us escalating this into an argument, and we'll be sour on each other for a while. Or alternatively, I can visualize saving my response to the caring and sharing time, and with a 100% likelihood that I'll be heard and seen fully, or alternatively, pretty much a 90% likelihood that we'll get into an argument about this. And so that gives somebody a real visualization, gives them an understanding of how they can really feel heard during the course of the week. And then I have them do a number of other things like to journal. And one of the things that they do when they journal is they do what I call a 4-part journaling. And the first part is what I call stage 1, which is the self-righteous stage, where you write down 100% of the reasons why you're right and 100% of the reasons why your partner is wrong, and then you begin to hone that, carve that out with 1 or 2 reasons why my partner has a point, and 3 and then more, and then eventually you write your last stage. You write the whole perspective from your partner's perspective.
Yeah, because I know that like being, working with a therapist over years, sometimes the things that you say, okay, well, this is what I'll do, we'll do this the next time, or this is what we'll do. It's easier said when you're calm, everybody's okay, but then you know that like if you do get into a conflict situation, that sometimes like say couples have like words like, oh, if your tone starts to get off a little bit, I'll just say the word tone and you'll, then take that as this. But see, when you get to those points, sometimes it's like the one partner will say tone and the other partner will say, leave me alone with that. It's just because you're at that point now where it's harder just to implement those things you've learned in therapy, right? Then,
Right.
so it's a learning that you really have to get yourself when you're in that high conflict, that you've got to go back on these things you said you do, right? But it's hard. It's a
Yes,
hard
actually,
process.
you're pointing to one of the reasons why I wrote Role Mate to Soulmate, which is that when you say, for example, tone, when the person hearing this says tone, the person trying to say what she or he wants to say, is now hearing a criticism,
Right.
which leaves that person not only not heard, but criticized. And so that's almost a double jeopardy for the
Yeah.
person trying to do that. And so, which is, why and this is all, no one of us should feel badly about this because this is just biologically natural. As I said before, historically, when we heard criticism, it was an enemy, and so it was biologically natural for us to kill the enemy. And the people, and where the results were the children of the children of the children who behaved that way and survived. And if they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have survived, and we wouldn't be here.
Right.
And so we should all forgive ourselves for doing that natural biological response of defensiveness. And that's why you have to set a separate time aside and alter your natural biological response of defensiveness before you do that. And each of the six mindsets that I asked couples to do, the one was the love guarantee, the other one was the thing about the die for. It was two of those six mindsets. Before as you're doing those, you're calming your body. You're saying them out loud. The value of saying them out loud is, I'll provide this love guarantee for you. Is that the person about to do the criticism hears that you are making yourself safe, and therefore she or he feels safe when they know that you're making yourself safe, because it's not safe to share a concern or give a criticism if your partner doesn't feel safe. It's going to only escalate and create a lack of safety for both of you.
So what would you say to couples that say, okay, well then if we say a word, whatever keyword they picked, I just picked one like tone, okay. What would you do while they're learning this, that if a situation starts to escalate between the two, where it's going to go where it normally goes, which is not good, how can they like flip a switch or to help the other one see, okay, we have to bring this down and we have to table it for that sharing and caring? How do you get to that?
The place, I basically talk about something that I call alone power, which is that either one of you, let's say you're my daughter and you're criticizing me as a dad, and I am getting defensive. My part of the responsibility would be just to say to you, I can't hear. Let's save that to caring and sharing, where I can really hear your concern fully without becoming defensive.
Okay.
So I can volunteer that. Or if I respond to you with defensiveness, then you say, well, maybe I should be sharing this with you and caring and sharing, because then it'll be easier for you to hear it. We'll both be able to hear each other. So either partner can interrupt the cycle and say, let's save it to caring and sharing. And therefore, I say to couples, whenever either of you get into an argument, if because you both have a way of being, either one of you can say, let's save this to caring and sharing. And so therefore, any argument that persists is whose fault? It's both your faults, because either one of you can use this alone power to say, let's save it to caring and sharing.
Right. Okay. Good point. Yeah, that's good. What was I going to say? So you already mentioned that I did write down about that letter you got from the son of Sam Walton from Walmart, and you know, so you've done a lot of work with couples over the years, right? Let's see. You say that the four depleters of love: criticism, complaints, feeling controlled, and complacency.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, yes. The criticisms, in a sense, we've already handled. And when I ask people, when I see people break apart, it's almost always from the tendency to become defensive in response to a criticism. Now, let me deal with criticism here a bit, because from the perspective of the person giving the criticism, it usually does not feel like a criticism. It usually feels like a suggestion for something that could be done better that will improve the relationship. Whether it's something as simple as, like what you said before, not leaving the toilet seat up, or not, not doing something. They feel like, all right, if it's nice and clean around here, this will be great for both of us. But the person hearing any expression of a concern, that is, any expression of a request for a different attitude or a different behavior, like tone, will experience that request as a criticism. And so that's very important to realize, because one is almost always dealing with that gap.
Right.
And and it's not like one person's more at fault with that. When the situation's reversed, the experience is reversed. So that's the criticism part. And so the responding defensively is the depleter of love. The second is complaints. And many people say, well, let's say they choose a restaurant, or one of the couple chooses to go to a restaurant that they think will be really good, or they suggest a movie, and then you're at that restaurant, and your partner says, "Boy, that guy was a little obnoxious, don't you think?" Or that service was really slow, or the soup is really cold, or this is, and they make some criticisms of the restaurant. Well, from the perspective of the person doing that complaining, that feels like a complaint about the restaurant. From the person who recommended that restaurant, it very frequently feels like a complaint about them.
Right.
And so those are some of the gaps between the complaining and the experience of a complaint and the taking of that as criticism. The next is the controlling. So I ask in my workshops, how many people feel that you complain more than you think is really healthy or wise, or than you'd like to? And most people raise their hands that they do. And how many feel that you maybe criticize, now that you understand criticism, more than you'd like to? Almost everybody raises their hand. I say, how many people feel that you're controlling? Many fewer hands go up. And then I say, if you're criticized frequently, do you feel controlled by the person who's criticizing you frequently? Yes. If you have someone complaining frequently about recommendations that you make, do you feel a little controlled by those constant complaints? Yes. And then they get that the combination of criticizing and complaining is experienced by their partner as controlling. And very few people want to think of themselves as controlling. But if those other two things click, then that should also click. The other is complacency, and complacency is more complicated. So as I'm looking at you, it appears that you dress very thoughtfully, and you put makeup on very thoughtfully, and you do it in just very nice proportions, and you take very good care of yourself and your hair. And so let's say that you were single, and you were meeting when you first met are you married?
Yes.
Yes. You first met your husband, the chances are fairly good that you were, that you were looking over your wardrobe and checking it out, and he made sure he was properly shaved, and if he had a beard, it was clipped nicely, and you're and also checking out his wardrobe and thinking about the way he's going to deal with you, talk with you, not talk with his mouth full, or whatever negative things he might have as part of his history, and then maybe you move into each other, you get with each other, get married, And after a while, you begin to dress somewhat sloppily, or maybe wear old, sweats
Mm-hmm.
around, and and maybe not be so careful about various behaviors you have. And that lasts for a while, and that's sort of the setting in of complacency.
Right.
And then you get ready to go out on Saturday night to meet some people at a party, and it's a really nice party and with people that you really respect. And you start taking out the wardrobe again and putting on the makeup again and so on. And the underlying statement that's often unconscious for many couples is, I'm sort of like, leftovers to you. And,
Right.
now you're thinking about, you're suddenly concerned about every part of your body. And if somebody's coming over, you're cleaning up the house and you're making a good meal and checking out various recipes. And I feel like you're 10 times more attentive to the company than you are to me. What does that make me feel like? So that's the downside of complacency. The upside of complacency is that around each other, you feel comfortable being more
That's what I
yourself.
was just going to
More,
say. Yeah.
and
Right.
so, but the key thing to have happen here is bring complacency up in a caring and sharing session
Right.
and talk with each other about, are you out of balance? Are you at the balance that you'd like to have? Are there certain things that you are doing in the complacency mode that are sort of annoying to your partner,
Mm-hmm.
that you want feedback, that feedback on would help at least cutting out those things? Is there once a week or once every 2 weeks where we can set aside a time where we treat each other like company, and we make the best meal, and make believe we're meeting each other for the first time.
Right. Date
And if
night.
you
Yeah, or something.
what
Right.
was it?
A
Yes,
date night or something. Have that scheduled in.
exactly, a date
Right.
night, and the date night not just be comfortable things.
Mm-hmm.
It goes out of our way to
Mm-hmm.
make the house cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll find usually that also the passion results from that as well.
Right. Right. Because like when you were saying that about the complacency, you'll hear a couple say, well, I can be myself. I don't have to wear my makeup around my spouse. He likes me for who I am. So yeah, when you're going out, yeah, because you'll do that because you're going out somewhere. But I think it's a fine line between then if you have a spouse that's just not showering and not caring. It's a different than just kicking back and not wearing makeup, putting on some sweatpants,
Yeah.
right? So you have to have a balance, and I think it is important to make that time for whatever it is, and even if it's helping around the house for an hour a day or something where everybody can just do that. I mean, we do that, and I think it's just even the kids, everybody just helping and
Mhm.
in doing one goal to make everyone's life easier. So someone doesn't say, I do everything around here, no one helps, right? For an hour,
Abs-
everybody's going to help.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I talk about in the book also in relation to the kids is the importance once a week of having a family dinner night. And that chapter in Role Mate to Soulmate is how to create a family dinner night without creating a family dinner nightmare. And there's some very tricky things on the family dinner nights. One is, if you talk to teachers oftentimes and you say to them, which child in your class is really empathetic? And then the teacher points out somebody, and then asks them if they've met that child's parents. And oftentimes the parents will not be they will not say the parents are particularly empathetic. Because with a family dinner night, the way to create empathy with your children is not to always just be empathetic to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy does not create empathy. The requirement of your children to not only think of themselves and your empathy, but to also have empathy and think of the perspectives of the other brother and sister and your needs as a mother and father. Those are what create empathy from the child. Just one way empathy begets self centeredness, it does not beget empathy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, empathy is something that I'm lucky. Like my kids have been very empathetic, and it just happened at an early age. And my son, hold on one second. Let me just tell her. Julie, I'm live. I'll give you a call later. Love you. Okay, so my son, he might have been 5 years old, and we were driving down the road, and there was a truck, and it had hit a sign right near us, like it was a golf club sign. And the first thing he said was, "Oh my gosh, I hope her dad," like he didn't even know it was a dad. He goes, "I hope her dad didn't have a heart attack and hit that sign and die."
Wow.
And I thought, like, this 5-year-old, right? I just said, wow. And he had so much empathy. And I just said, because he put himself in the position that was a child in that car. She was driving with her dad. Her dad hit this sign. I hope, why would her dad hit this sign? Did he have a heart attack and go off the road? And I'm just looking at my 5-year-old like, wow, that's deep. Okay. But
you've done something right.
But still feeling like, well, that's great that, like he's really caring. I said, well, we don't know that anyone died, Ethan. I said, so we'll find out what happened, but let's just pray for them and that, they'll be okay. But I just, I was just taken back by that because, that just came just out of there. But I always feel good because, like, you'd hate for your kids not, to be uncaring and not have feelings for animals or people or anything. So, it's just.
So, Carolyn, what do you feel that you did to help stimulate that level of empathy in a 5-year-old boy?
I just think that, being around the family and how we are, like we have animals, we care, like we'll care for a chipmunk that got caught in a gutter, it's by example, I think just that who we are. So we took the little chipmunk in and we, nursed him back to health and just different things. I like where you said those other parents didn't have empathy. I sometimes feel I have too much, where like I get overly emotional about some things. If I see something on the news, like it's hard for me to get past it if it's really bad, or if like even like on Facebook or something, a lot of the sad things really affect me. So maybe I have too much, that's a fine balance too, because there's a lot of times, and I have friends like that, where our whole day can be made horrible by someone we don't even know because we have so much empathy for a situation. Either we identify with it or, and it's hard. Like, what do you do there? Is there such a thing as having like too much empathy?
Yes.
That.
Absolutely. Every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice. I mean, there are not many sentences that have no exceptions, but I have never discovered an exception to every virtue taken to its extreme becoming a vice. In the case of that type of empathy, so when your son is seeing you display empathy toward many animals and situations and so on, that's a good role model for empathy. But if you are only showing empathy to your son, and your son is not seeing a role model of empathy toward many things beside himself, that's where the empathy can, one-sided empathy only to your son, and not having a role model of empathy to your sister, your brother, and to dad's situation of working all the time, or mom's situation of working and juggling this and juggling that. That's when it becomes a problem.
Right. I say, okay, I get where you're going with that. So yeah. But yeah, where were we? So criticism, feeling, and complacency, those 4 C's. And what else did I say? Sustaining love, you say, seems biologically unnatural, where falling in love is biologically natural. So the sustaining the love, we fall in love easily, right? It's biologically there, but the sustaining it. And
yes. When you fall in love, the book's title, Role Mate to Soulmate. Many people feel they just met each other and they have met their soulmate and they have passion and they really have so much in common. And so, but then the soulmate part starts wearing off as they play roles and don't really pay attention to each other and do, there's 23 love enhancements that I talk about in the book, and virtually none of them are practiced naturally. They're all biologically unnatural. All the things we talked about, people don't biologically naturally say, let's create a conflict-free zone. Let's create a caring and sharing time. Let's do, all these 23 love enhancements that I have in the book. These are all unnatural. And they all take, and I will really say, usually authors don't say this about their own book, but reading Role Mate to Soulmate is not enough. You really have to practice it. And the practices are there for all of the 23 love enhancements. But it's if you only read it and do it once, it's like going to the gym and or yoga, once and saying that was a great experience. But if you never go again, the chances are fairly good you will not have that same benefit 3 months down the road.
Yes, it's practice, 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 and you're not going to have it, like the different components of those caring and sharing and stuff. So you'll have to do it in order to get better at it. And so maybe you're reading from the book, when you begin to write, and then you'll be able to do it naturally, where it'll become second nature. And that's the whole thing, is just practicing it, right? So we went over your complaints.
And even the book actually is not adequate. And it's one of the reasons why I make practically free an online virtual course that I do, so that people can just, when they get the book, there's a QR code that gives them the course for $97, so very inexpensively. And so that allows them to both read the book that goes wider and deeper than the course, but the course takes you step by step through doing it with your partner, and then you can see me work with a couple of couples on mistakes that they made or things that they have questions about and so on, that will usually apply, that are chosen to apply to the mistakes that couples often make in that process.
Oh, okay, that's good. Now, the other thing, you have civil war to civil dialogue, which is so important now. Like I have a little caveat on my show. We don't discuss politics. We don't really discuss religion. I mean, we'll pray for someone but it's just because those two subjects can be very divisive. And I know, like, we just had a regular Zoom meeting with, it's part of the inner workings of the channel. And there was an author that was going to come on, and it was kind of a political thing, but not really. He was an actor, but he was in a politically charged movie. And so one of my inner people said, oh, that sounds great to have that person on. And it centered around Watergate. Okay. Well, that brought about a conversation between our inner people, and it certainly got very heated really fast. And I thought, wow, we're all good friends in here. And it went from 0 to 60. And I said, how can we do this on the show? And then, for the people in the audience, the watching after, because sometimes people put so much personal thing. Like, I have friends of all different, I don't discuss politics. I'm not a very political outspoken person, but I have friends that are, and they may not feel the same way I do, but I would never not be friends with them because of that. Like, I don't let that get away from our friendship and whatever makes us friends. Some people can't disassociate that from the person, and they just, they're that? Sorry, not friends with you. So what would be your advice on that civil war to civil dialogue when things like politics do come up?
Yes, as I have a whole process in Role Mate to Soulmate, as you know, about doing that. And the first step is appreciating the other person. And this is one of the first steps in building the reservoir of love for a couple too. So let's say we have RFK Jr. and his sister that are totally disagreeing with each other. RFK Jr. has just supported Trump, and his sister is a Democrat, obviously.
Right.
And so the first thing that they would do is to acknowledge that they're going to go through a process that's artificial to be able to, because to avoid politics and avoid religion is avoiding our values. And so if those values in expressing those are going to erupt into discord, then yes, avoid them. But if there's a way to really appreciate each other and hear each other's perspectives, how much more it will deepen the love of RFK Jr. and his sister, or Tim Walz and Jeffrey Walz. Jeffrey Walz has said that, the progressive ideology of Tim Walz was so repulsive to him, he hasn't spoken to him for 8 years for that reason. So no matter who it is on which side of the perspective, the first thing to do is appreciate them at multiple levels of specificity. So, suppose, let's say the sister of RFK Jr. says, the first appreciation would be, I remember how when you were young, you were so inquisitive and so curious, and then you'd understand and grasp different perspectives so quickly. And then when other people were afraid to do something, to talk about them for fear that somebody would disagree with them, you would be willing to speak up. And I always thought to myself and admired you for how courageous you are. Mm-hmm. So before RFK Jr. is hearing the critique of how in the world could you possibly support Trump, he's hearing from his sister about how much she was appreciated and admired and respected him. And she's not just hearing it in general terms, like I appreciated you, I appreciate you a lot. Mm-hmm. That's like so, it doesn't hold. But if you're recounting childhood examples in this case of the way you've appreciated this person, and so when you're going over for Thanksgiving or during the end of the fall and it's in mid-election season, and everything is all about this. The first step is appreciating at what I call 5 levels of specificity. And each of you explain that before you do, you share the differences you have, that you're first going to hear each other's appreciations of that other person's at these very specific types of levels, mm-hmm. Where the actual story is told and so on. And then you look at what you have in common. What do RFK Jr. and his sister have in common, and Tim and Jeff Walz have in common? Why are they so angry? Because they both care. Mm-hmm. And RFK and Tim Walz are both active participants in caring. And what is a democracy made of? It's made of, at its best, people who care. Mm-hmm. When people don't care and or are apathetic, that's when a democracy really falls apart. So they're seeing what they have in common with each other before they move to that next level. And so what I outline in the Civil War to Civil Dialogue is what types of steps need to be taken to be able to hear the best intent of somebody else. So let's work on best intent. I mentioned a few minutes ago that every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice. So let's say that Jeff Walz feels in general that the repulsive progressive ideology of Tim Walz is just repulsive. And so the first thing he would say is he would find the virtue before it became a vice. Mm. So finding the virtue might be looking at, okay, feminism. Can I find a woman or a mother, a sister, or a daughter of mine that pursued maybe a career? And in the process of pursuing a career, she pursued something that she probably wouldn't even have thought of pursuing had feminists not articulated the value that women have value other than being at home. And he probably can do that. He can probably find somebody in his life that benefited from the best portions of the feminist movement. And before we attack, so that would be something that would be an example of finding the virtue before it became a vice. And if somebody is saying DEI is just so filled with cancel culture and making people have victim power being a form of power, and it used to be that this feminist movement was so much in favor of women being empowered, but now it's focused on victim power. So you find the empowerment before you focus on the victim power having become the vice of that. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the first steps that I introduced. But you set aside that time to hear each other. You make it clear that it's not biologically natural to hear each other that has a different perspective, because when we hear people with different perspectives, like when we hear China criticizing us, and when China hears us criticizing them, they get up their defenses. And it's not easy to hear because we have a history of knowing that when Israel and Gaza are criticizing each other, it may not be safe for long. And so that's what's natural. But when we love somebody, we're in conflict between what comes natural and what we really want from our family members and our friends.
Right. And like it just like how Facebook has exacerbated, maybe you wouldn't even know sometimes what your friends or some of your extended family are even thinking, but because people are posting every thought on social media, that sometimes brings up things that would never happen if it wasn't there, right? We didn't.
Absolutely. And the algorithms, as we all know, you watch anything 2 or 3 times, and then 15 more things supporting that bias come up and make you feel after a while that that's the only thing that is true. And whenever we say when we say things like truth to power, think about the self-righteousness of that. I have the truth, you have the power. Think of the word progressive. People who call themselves progressives, indirectly they're saying that everyone that disagrees with me is regressive. Think of the word patriotic. When somebody says I'm a patriot, that suggests that everyone that disagrees with me is unpatriotic. Right. Those are all self-righteous terms that create alienation and distance between people.
Yeah, and just like how many people now consider the American flag, which should be a symbol for all of us in America, to be assigned to a particular party, and which is crazy, right? So, but it's what's happening. So, it's just, I mean, there are people that completely sign off during political elections and stuff. They'll say, I have to get off Facebook. I've seen it, in my own, I have to get off Facebook because I'm getting too invested in, like, they got really so invested in either like defending or what their position or what they feel. And I've had people close to me, really, they couldn't get off of it. And I said, okay, but why are you, I understand your passion. It's great, but you don't look like you're having a good time. Like that, this is causing you stress. You're upset. Why? Like, if it's that, don't look at it. Sign off of Facebook. Don't even get on it, because like you're coming like, oh, your cousin said this, and I've got to go set my cousin straight on this. It's not your responsibility. Just absolve that for you, and you'll be so much happier. Don't worry about it. But a lot of times they can't do it for whatever reason, and it causes them. Their passion is causing them so much grief, it seems.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's, so it's important with somebody like that to recognize that they're pursuing a purpose, that they are caring, and also recognize that I care about you being healthy. I care about you being happy. I care about you being balanced. Take a break. Take a vacation. Yeah. That's what they are for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not getting anywhere. Because, we all know there's people that, not even political, but just like very adversarial people that'll ask you for an apology or whatever it is. You give it to them. It's not good enough. You come back with this one. And it's just no matter what you do, if you have it in black and white, they're never going to accept it. You'll never, it's just better like to disengage from people like that. But I think some people just have a really hard time in turning that off or walking away from that kind of toxicity, because it is toxic.
And so I do hope the steps in the book to be able to hear somebody and to that you disagree with, and that you feel is where you feel like they're an atheist, therefore they're evil. They are they're so God oriented, therefore they're evil, or they're sort of just lost in that, or whatever the differences are about religion or politics. That you don't have to change your mind to be able to leave somebody you love feeling seen and feeling heard, and having you identify for them the virtue before it became a vice.
Right. And the last thing I just want to talk about, like parental relationships with like even adult children, because as parents, we feel, well, I can speak for myself, sometimes what would come across as criticism, and it is, but you're saying it for a place because you want to help your child, not hurt them, not make them feel bad, but and then you're caught between like a rock and a hard place. Like, do I say it because I know it's going to cause defensiveness immediately? So do I just say, look, they'll probably not even, care about or change what I say. Maybe it's something about something they're wearing, or, like a small behavior, not something major. Not, okay.
Yes.
So is it better for the parent just to say, okay, I'm just going to refrain from saying anything, and they're an adult, they can live their life the way they want. Maybe that's not what I would be wearing to that, or we're doing, in that situation. I'm just going to step back and not offer that criticism that I think is going to be helpful to my child. Is it better to do that?
No, I think it depends on the age of the child and also the frequency of the comments, and how important is the issue. And so, if it's a life or death issue, then like the
Right.
child climbing too high in a tree and potentially falling out, you can either get under the tree and make sure you help the child to
Right.
cushion a fall. Or you say, I have only one gift in life, and it was my legs, and I was able to kick football in high school almost as far as a pro, and but my father just fought me about not becoming a football player because he knew that at 6'1" and 149 pounds. The chances of my getting crushed by some 300-pound person was pretty darn great, and I think no matter what my size was, he would have prevented me from doing that anyway. And he got into fierce arguments with the coach. And I truly, truly bless him for doing something that I wanted to be able to, show off with kicking, field goals, et cetera, like any high school kid. But that was a life or death, issue. I mean, I could have been not maybe life or death, but severely hurt, had a concussion, spinal cord injury,
Right.
Been severely hurt. And so at those types of levels, I think it's really important not just to set boundaries, but to do something very different from setting boundaries, which is to enforce the boundaries you set. And so when the issue is that important, and then again, if it's so frequently that you're doing that, and it's not a life or death issue, then you're protecting your children from getting experiences that are very important for them to experience. So mothers and fathers, for example, will oftentimes, especially in divorce situations, a father will be more likely to take the child to a playground and say, leave the child at the playground. And then, let's say it's a divorce situation and there's a visitation type of situation, and the mother picks up the child later in the afternoon, but the child at the playground got into a big fight. And got a black eye or whatever. The mother sees the black eye and says, "What happened?" And she says, "I got into a fight on the playground. Where was your dad?" "Oh, he was home." "Oh, yeah, the finals of the basketball tournament are on today. Yeah, he cares more about basketball than he cares about you." That's the way it appears to the mother, but oftentimes to the father, to allow that child an opportunity to have whatever happens happen, and then talk with the child afterwards about, well, what were the red flags? Was somebody drinking? Was somebody doing what I used to be involved with when I was younger? The high school kids had something called fouling practices, how to foul and get away with it. Was that a part of your situation? And so many fathers' perspectives on that is, I want you to have the opportunity to fail. And then now, while I can help you walk through the process that can in the future avoid those failures, rather than me protect you, and then you go out into a world unprotected when I'm not around. And so, and that's a good example of what's so important about father and mother communication, is what I call checks and balance parenting, of both parents understanding each other's best intent. What was your intent in leaving that child at that playground? What was, et cetera. And so these are some of the things that I talk about in Roommate to Soulmate that are so important, especially for a divorced couple. Divorced couples will often feel that, all right, I'm not going to have to ever deal with them again, so I'll just tolerate the husband or the wife. But in fact, if you have children that you're raising and you are a couple and you're divorced, that's the most important time to do some of the exercises in Roommate to Soulmate, because your children are going to the children of divorce are far more likely to be divorced themselves, and a significant reason because the communication patterns that their parents were role models for were ones that led to conflict without being able to know how to handle and resolve that conflict in a way that's helpful. It's important to be able to have disagreements as parents, and for your children to be able to see those disagreements and then have and then see how you resolved, hear, and respect each other during the process of those disagreements.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And the tools to like how to communicate properly and how to bring it back if something goes, wrong, and that it's not, just have to avoid like that conflict just splitting you up, right? How to come back together. And that's really important for kids to see that. I totally agree. And I have your link to your book up, and I see people in our viewers are saying they're buying your book and they really enjoyed this. So I thank you for coming on. Roommate to Soulmate is your book, and I'd love to have you back anytime. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go that you?
No, just that if you are buying the book, really try to invest in the online virtual course with it. It's very inexpensive, but if any of this does not work for you and you've done it with your partner, just my email is in the book. Email me. I will refund your money. I don't care about the money, but I do care. But if, on the other hand, if it really is helpful, please let me know how it is. That keeps me inspired to. I'm 81 years old and I'm still working every day.
Are you? Wow, you look amazing. Wow, I would never guessed you're 81. Wow.
Thank you.
Amazing.
And so, this is what keeps me going. That feedback.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, we'd love to have you back. And thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. And I have your link. It'll be in the video description. And if you stop back, your publicist has the video link. Maybe they have any questions for you. Anybody that watches at a later time, because we have audience all over the world. So some people are in the UK and Australia, and they watch at different times. But they can put questions in the comments. And if you want to go back and check them out, you're able to do that. Okay?
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to meet you, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job, and your book is wonderful.
Thank you. I'd be happy to come back. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to end this, and then we'll see everybody later. Thank you so much.
Carolyn, give me your phone number, and if you
yeah. Let me, you know what? Let me can I get your email and I'll email it to you? So
yes, it's Warren.
Warren.
Okay. At warrenfarrell.com.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And I'll email it to you.
They made it real simple, so I can remember.
Okay, I've got it right here. I'll email you right after I close this up. All right. Thank you so much.
It's really been a pleasure.
It's been a really interesting meeting for me, and your book is really helping too with things that I'm working with. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye, Carolyn.
Bye-bye. Okay, to everybody, we'll see you later on today. I hope that was informative and helpful, and that you enjoyed it. I love you guys. God bless. Prayers, and I'll see you.